Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It means a lot to see so many of you taking this time off your busy schedule and joining us for this session. Under the IT Digital Conversations, our topic for the day is Adopt Industry 4.0 or Risk Being Overtaken. It's been quite a journey for manufacturing, that has happened over decades, from the first industrial revolution of mechanization through steam and water power to the fourth one, which we call as I 4.0, with a combination of cyber physical systems, the Internet of Things, and the Internet of Systems, making Industry 4.0 possibility and something like a smart factory a reality. Now, for a lot of people, Industry 4.0 is a marketing buzzword, while others have seen significant transformation which deserves our attention. But there was a world we knew pre-COVID, and there is one now which might have changed the demand and supply patterns of every industry. In such times, while industries try to move to the recovery phase and establish continuity, does it make sense to invest and adopt Industry 4.0 anymore? Or is there any alternative method to recover and be better prepared for such times in the future? I think all I know is that I'm not an expert in this, but I have got an august panel of industry mavericks who would be able to share their insights on the relevance of Industry 4.0 and the way forward. And what adds to make this session impactful are the hosts of experts, practitioners, attendees, like all of you who have joined us today. I'm your host, Suman Bhaumik. I lead the events for the IET in India. So without any further delay, kindly allow me to introduce our moderator for this session, Mr. Pranjal Sharma. Pranjal is the author of India Automated. He is also an economic analyst and a member of the Global Expert Network of the World Economic Forum. I pass this on to you now, Pranjal, while I go incognito.
Thank you so much, Suman, and it's a pleasure to be here at this webinar on a theme and a topic which is extremely important for all of us. And technology and its impact on India has been enhancing in the last few years, especially a fourth industrial revolution from every way that you can interpret it. But I think in a post-COVID world, the adoption of technology in enterprise and government delivery of various citizen-oriented services has really gone through the roof. So let me quickly, get the conversation going, but at the same time do a quick introduction. Anandi Iyer, head of India Office of Fraunhofer, she's based in Bengaluru. She's the director and head of the India office, and she was for several years also special advisor to the Federal Ministry of Education in Germany. I'd also like to introduce Krishnan Warner. He has the IoT solution engineering for Siemens IoT, and he has rich experience in helping various organizations across the world on digitalization. So it's important that we speak to practitioners and you hear from practitioners about what is going on, because that's the way it is. And of course, Mr. P.V. Shivaram, who's the advisor at Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution and retired non-executive chairman of DNR India, and also the past president of the Association of, the Automation Association of India. So let me start with Anandi. Anandi, the importance of Fourth Industrial Revolution for India is really the key issue. Everybody looks at it in a different way. With enterprise and the government and civil society is differently, but within enterprise, if you see, each department also somehow looks at it differently. So, the first set of the first theme I'd like to come to all the speakers is really how do you see the importance of the fourth industrial revolution in India? So I'd like to begin with your thoughts, Anandi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pranjal, and thank you to IET India for having me on this forum. It's a real pleasure to be sitting here in such august company, and I'm delighted to know that there are more than 200 people joining us. Fraunhofer in India and in my person, we've been associated with this particular topic for the last nearly 5 years. And many years ago, we actually did a roadmap for Indo-German collaboration in the field of Industry 4.0. But I think and some of the thoughts that we came up with in that study, which was really pretty comprehensive, covering quite a few SMEs and large companies in India, trying to understand what is the difference between how they perceive Industry 4.0 and in Germany or in Europe or in USA, as you know, Fraunhofer has a global footprint. I think one of the fundamental things that came up in this thought was that in the study was that here we are dealing with a revolution that's happening at the same time across the world. So when Suman talked about various revolutions of say manufacturing or the first industrial, second, third, many countries were left out of that. But today, the world is a connected place, and so all of us, in some form or the other, will feel the impact of this revolution. So there is a very clear imperative to address this and not think that this is a wave that will go away. The second thing is that India has a very strong mix of excellent companies that are world class, and there are a number of companies that are small, medium, micro, who deal with several issues, whether they are legacy issues of machinery, but also people skilling is a big subject. So we are looking at a range, a very, very broad spectrum. And so one needs to really understand which sector, what kind of industry that we are talking about, and what is the gaps in technology, because we are all aware that India lost out the chance to be a manufacturing superior power because of several reasons. Let's not go into that. But then the fact is that our mission of improving the GDP in manufacturing from 16 to 25% is not going to happen if we do not have this kind of revolution spread across the industry, whether it's small and medium or large. In fact, I would put all my bets on the small and medium industry catching up because they are the supply chain of the world. So, to my mind, India, the imperative of Industry 4.0 in India, or like we talked about the other day, it's a more overwhelming topic of digitalization, covers a much larger spectrum. It is really to see what does a specific sector require, a particular company require, and what is the toolbox that I need with which I can be competitive and connected in the present world.
That's important, Anandi. I think to understand what suits the enterprise or the organization, that choice is very critical, and it cannot be without some diligence and understanding of what your objectives are. I'd like to turn to you, Krishan, because Siemens has been doing a lot of work in India on the digital factory and several related activities. And since you head IoT, IoT has picked up across several verticals in India as well. Can you share some of your thoughts as well as maybe your experience in Germany, and how does that map to how it could be relevant for India? Though the economies are different, but some of the needs of the enterprises could be common.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks also having me here on the group and sharing the your thoughts and being able to also interact with the wide community. So what we identified, and which is very interesting, is the current COVID-19 situation. Yeah. So we talked a lot over the last years with companies in Germany, around the globe, about digitalization, Industry 4.0, and all the buzzwords that are on the market. And I think most of them adapted and have realized that it is to be more efficient, to be more adaptable, to implement this. But I think also the COVID crisis now gives us an insight who has really prepared well and who not. Yeah. So I would see these three stages we are currently observing in this crisis is for companies coming from surviving, where we also can discuss controversially, will digitalization really help in the case of surviving, where markets are breaking away, where you also see that supply chains cannot be handled. For sure, there's a lot of implementations and so on, where you find to stabilize your business, but it's a really, really critical situation. And I would say mostly digitalization has not really helped on that stage. But what's interesting now is to overcome the crisis. So we say all the economies are starting, the recovery phase is starting. And there we noticed a big difference in companies. So companies who have adapted to digitalization, to certain implementation on certain areas, we see adapting to this situation much more easily. So they can scale up or even change their processes and value change completely. Also to react on the market situation where you notice after such a crisis that certain product features have changed, certain products not becoming relevant, you have to adapt to another product. So this is where those companies find much more easier to deal with this change. And one aspect I want to point out, and I think this is interesting also to discuss on, is the entire change management of a company. We always talk about technologies that help, we talk about use cases to improve, but what I see is that those companies who are driving a digital journey also have brought this into the mindset of their employees, which means that employees can adopt easily, the culture is adopt easily, and I see this also for the further discussion as a major part of that. So having technology, having the use cases, but also think of how you bring this knowledge of change management, of cultural change, also to your organization, which is a very relevant part.
That's terrific, Krishan. I think no change happens if the organization. It's that you just apply a certain technology, run a software, and you can say that you're plugged into the new way of doing things. So I think it has to be seen in a holistic manner, and that's a very important piece. Shivram, I'd like to come to you. You have deep experience of what is happening in India. You've seen the transitions, several cycles of technology. You have seen come into India. From a time in the 1780s when we talked about technology transferred, and we were looking at everybody else for technology. We are now in a situation where the fourth industrial revolution technologies are really very egalitarian. They're democratic, and everybody has equal access to it. So to that extent, India has a great to use the what is the kind of relevance if happened of earlier.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Shivram, over to you.
Yeah, now already started. Okay, so first of all, welcome everybody to this nice session, and thank you, Pranjal, for throwing this question at me. As I would like to start off with actually what does India want? You see, on one hand, do we want this industrial revolution for? I will answer by saying this is the age of industrial IR4, and there's no question of wanting to be in it or not wanting to be in it. It is like being in 21st century. We are in 21st century, whether we like it, we don't like it. Apart from a normal, let us say, time period, what else does it mean? It also means a set of fashions, behavior, and way of tackling problems. Okay. Now, do we want to take up the IR4 way of tackling problems? Why should we want to do it again? We have an aspiration to become a global power. We want to sit at the high table with the leading countries, right? And if you want to live with these countries, we must also have the technology and the way of doing business which is compatible with them. Definitely need not be exactly the same, but it has to be compatible with them. And for a long time, I will say not just now the 15 years or 20 years or something like that, but over a few centuries, we have got used to being treated as a consumer nation. That there are technologies, there are products being produced somewhere, and we aspire to consume those products. Today, when we want to be at the equal level and we want to be at the high table, then we must also think that equally we must be able to produce goods which are aspired for and desired by other nations, other countries. Right? My friend Christian has talked about COVID and post-COVID. You would have seen in the last weeks that one of the standard reactions which has come from the industry wide and from all the people also is first to turn to the government to ask for some help, to the banks to ask for some money, and thirdly, now I don't know if all of you are aware, must be aware, that people, industries turn to their vendors and say, today now I am in a difficult situation and please help me. Help me how? By not asking, or delaying my payments, by giving me better credit limits, longer credit period, and perhaps even somebody asks, can you give me a higher discount because of the crisis? Okay, so these are the standard reactions. And similarly with the banks, they got the vendors, and some companies I have heard. I hope it's not true, but they are even asking the employees to take a reduction in their salaries. So these are all some, I will say, very immediate and panic reactions. Actually, the strong voice to say where is the technology which is available to take me out of this mess, which is not of my creation, this voice is still mute. And today I will say that whenever I talk, whenever I get a chance to talk, I will like to amplify this voice and say this truly technology is the means to have a lasting solution for this, which is not just for this crisis and for this week, but for every future crisis which may come and forever. And this technology is digitalization. Okay. Now, industrial revolution 4 and digitalization are closely related topics, but yet slightly different. But I think most of you already know it, and this is part of the problem today that familiarity is the enemy of knowledge. If you have heard all the words, then people feel that they know it. Actually, it may not be so. It can be a little different, right? So this is what I want to say here. India does need to act. India does need to act in ways and means which are compatible with the behavior of today, which we generically call as Industrial Revolution number 4. Thank you, Pranjal. I think you can take back from here.
Thank you. I want to move on to the next theme. Anandi, if I can come to you on that. You mentioned about the identification of the right issues. What do you think would be the sectors or functions within an enterprise which will see the most impact? How do you advise companies to approach it?
See, like I said earlier, also this is such an all-encompassing kind of a topic that absolutely any department, any function is addressed in varying degrees. If you assume that the main reason we are talking about Industry 4.0 or smart manufacturing today, which is what we at Fraunhofer like to call it, smart manufacturing, which means that what is a smart way of producing, distributing, and servicing products to reach the society, then basically we are talking about 4 or 5 elements that need to be in place. One is stability, the other is safety, reliability of operation, traceability of your network, and the adaptability, which also Christian talked about. If you look at all these sections, and I'm not sure if we are leaving out any department, and if you take people as a core or the center of this entire operation, then you're touching every aspect. But there are certain industries that are extremely critical to IE 4.0. Of course, manufacturing, but also I think pharma, services, which is India's strong point. I'm thinking of logistics, which is again in India such a weak point. So if you look at both sides, logistics in India is a sector that has not been addressed to the extent we should have, which is why we are not able to be competitive in distribution of goods and services. I'll give you an example that recently Fraunhofer got and which we are working on. One large company came to us and said, look, I have a very big distribution network, and every day my vendors come up with several questions. Where do I go? Whom do I service? How do I pick up the product from here? I get a whole lot of data. How do I analyze this data? How do I make sense of this data? It's a big warehouse of data, and I'm not sure whether I'm concentrating on the right elements. So we set up in place for them one, of course, big data analysis to see where does the data come from the customer. How does the different delivery executives pick up this data? How do they analyze it? And finally, how do they find the shortest way to the customer? Now, this is something which any company can use, right? And on the same side, if you were to think of the larger logistic companies today, again, coming back to the COVID situation, there were so many products that were getting wasted because they couldn't be transported. So, what did many people do? And a fantastic experience, which I was also part of, is the Farmers Harvesting Network, where you organize a platform, a tech platform, where, and a very simple one at that, where farmers say, here is my produce for this region, and I can supply within an X radius without much difficulty. Then you bring in the users who say, hey, I would like mangoes, I would like this, I would like that. And very quickly, the producer is reaching the user without the produce getting distorted or wasted. Now, these are some of the examples that I think could be very, very relevant for an industry 4.0 digitization, smart manufacturing, whatever you want to call it. But always remember that in all of these activities, it has to be people centric, and it has to look at processes that are made more efficient, more secure, and more reliable.
Yeah, thanks, Anandi. I think Pranjal has dropped off in the meanwhile because he's trying to log back in.
Okay.
I think wonderful insights there, and I would like to ask this to Christian also regarding the sectors and the functions where he feels that Industry 4.0 is needed the most. I'm sure you can bring in perspectives from Germany and give a holistic view to this, Christian.
Absolutely, and I also bring up some examples. So let me share one view. So for me, this Industry 4.0 digitization, or however you want to call it, yeah, it's not a single topic for a dedicated domain. So it's a dedicated specific sector or function. It is something that we also look with our customers entirely. So we look on the value chain, we look where are the challenges, where are the most potentials, which we need to improve or can be improved, and then we select the right technology. That's why I always recommend look not too tight on this topic. That most customers we have seen in the beginning when Industry 4.0 came up, there was this concept of smart factory, there was a smart production, cyber physical systems who can connect and adapt. A lot of customers already invested in automation. Then, depending on what kind of manufacturer you are, you're already on a higher automation level. And we started the discussion. Customer said, "Why do we take care of digitalization?" And then we started to really widen up the view and said, "Look, how do you handle logistics? How do you handle your partners? How you handle your services in the back? What kind of production information, for example, is needed in these steps, in this after sales steps, or in that? How can you create loopbacks?" And this brought in a very different angle to customers to see that the improvements are, as already has been said, are on an integrated layer along the value chain. And I will give you one example because this has become very interesting. So I think the production side I would put away for the moment and look on the product and plant engineering phase. And this is very interesting because we have seen there, especially in product engineering, a lot of manual steps, a lot of different teams interacting independently, so also working sequentially. So a lot of time is going, and if you maybe look also in your companies or reflect with one of your customers, you will find looking on this engineering stuff, it took weeks or even months to create a new product. And this is where we worked with a lot of customers, and we share one example with a customer who is producing a small good, and this good will take 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, before we really completely can close this engineering. And we looked on that and we saw that different departments were involved, that this department needs interaction, also repeatable information have been sent on that. And we said, okay, why can we not automatically integrate your entire product design phase? So coming from a sales guy who's at the customer, who's defining the parameters, and then if you look in the engineering, it's always the same what the people are doing. These are experts for sure, they evaluate and so on. And we were looking on a rule-based engineering. So we completely implemented this solution in a system where the parameters from sales coming, rule-based engineering is running this, is comparing this to, or is executing this on CAD, electronic systems, so that you already have the entire digital twin of that. So you can also perform the automated testing. And it took us 2 to 3 days since everything is completed. And 2 to 3 days, it's only because there are still some manual steps behind. Otherwise, you can run it in 1 to 3 hours in something like this. And this was a great idea because we have improved the process and the time to market dramatically. But also the customer was discussing and saying, okay, if I can speed like this, then I can also print my product afterwards and create a prototype directly shortly after that, and I can show it my customers, which is also a great benefit, for them, because then the customer already can use it, can see if it fits in his process, and so on. And the next step with this customer is then to say, okay, if we have all that information available, why not evaluate if you also can produce this good? So you know all your production environment, you can check if the certain capacity is available, but also if the capabilities are available. And this will be the next step. And this is, I think, a good example, which also when we reflect to crisis, and we said we have to bring down times for planning, for changing, which has improved this customer significantly.
Great. Prantal, you could hear that, right?
Yes, thanks, Christian. I'll ask Shivram about this. Yes, I'm back. I'm just asking Shivram the point. I'm getting my video on. So, Shivram, the process and the approach which is followed in Germany, perhaps, is that also something that India can learn from?
See, we are, as a nation, great experts in learning from various sources. We have a Guru Parampara. We learn all along. But finally, we have to put all this learning to use in our workplace in our own manner. Correct? Among the various things, yes, typically in an enterprise, we look at 3 areas of improvement. Finally, there are some projects going on in every enterprise to work on each of these areas. This being, first of all, being operational excellence, how to produce the goods better, cheaper, etc. Second is the customer approach, correct? How to get more customers, how to get better customers, and so on. And the third is innovation, right? So these are the 3 areas, and we are broadly always working there. Now, where does this digitalization and the new technologies, where do it give us the maximum benefit? Just now, as Christian said, and earlier Anandi also said, they are equally applicable to all the 3 broad areas. But we have to think of one thing. This digitalization is not just a technology infusion into the organization. It is to make a difference in the way we work. As much as we focus on OEE, that is the overall equipment efficiency, we also have to look at the person efficiency. And in most cases, if you would analyze very dispassionately, we see that we spend a huge amount of time in checking, cross-checking, verifying the reports that we get all the time. Correct? So now, if we can get unmanipulated, authentic data right from the source, I like to call it data untouched by a human hand, right? A lot of this effort can be saved. And this is something which is enabled very strongly by these digital technologies, these data technologies. They are primarily for that. Yes? So we are not trying to say that we want to sidestep the humans or we use technology to spy on humans. But we want to cut out this unnecessary amount of feedback and auditing. I mean, if I imagine in my own company how many hundreds of hours we have spent on audits, it will be frightening. And why do we need to do that? Because the data, the source of data is not very transparent. There's a lot of hand and paper which is involved there. There can be many errors which can come in, and etc. For example, if you take the pharma industry, the entire procedure of traceability of pedigree of the product is needed because the data does not come directly from the source. And therefore, today we have many validation systems. Now, today, if you want to think of entering into global supply chains and you want to get integrated into it, maybe with made in India, maybe with make in India, even then, we want to have verifiable and transparent data exchange at every stage. We have set our mark in the world on a mission level excellence. We have done fantastic things like sending a mission to Moon, to Mars, fantastic things. But yet, when it comes to routine productionization of even things which are, let me say, legacy material, we are not so good. We are not famous. Our products are really not today famous for either their competitiveness or for their innovativeness. So how do you come out of this? We need to know where are we lacking. How do you know where we are lacking? Only when you have data. Only if you measure. Only that thing which you measure, you can improve. If you cannot measure, if you rely on hearsay, then actually true improvement is very difficult. I think I will continue to go on this because it's a pet topic of mine, but I will stop here and give it back to Pranjal. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a brilliant point, Shivaram. I think measurability and using data is absolutely critical because you can't plan your next step just based on guess and perhaps intuition. So there has to be a process for that. Another, I want to come build on this point and also move to the next theme about a lot of this in terms of using new approaches, using data. Being ready to adopt a lot of new technologies possible for large enterprises. But when you look at small and medium enterprises, many people say that even in India, most of the SMEs in Industry 2.0, we are talking about Industry 4.0, but large parts of our SMEs are still struggling with very basic challenges. How do you then bring them on board the platform of Industry 4.0? There are several challenges in terms of, which have been discussed already in terms of culture, approach, the funds required, and the right kind of mentoring. How see that? And I think that's the like all the three speakers talk about. But with Anand.
Yeah, I think just adding to that, Pranjal, also Sunil David, who is the regional director IoT from AT&T, part of the attending list here, he has asked a question to Anandi, which is similar. That since SME sector needs to adopt I 4.0 in a big way, as per your previous studies, what is the current level of adoption amongst SME companies in India? What percentage of SME companies have started their journey? So, I just thought that because this is exactly what, in sync with what Pranjal was asking, I just thought I would club this to your way. You're on mute, Anandi.
Yeah, sorry about that. And thank you for that question. It's great to know that there are such stalwarts in the audience as well. Delighted to know that. See, when we did the study about 4 years ago, I must say that the survey also indicated, and this was followed up with CMTI with another survey, which said that less than 5% of the SMEs are aware of what is Industry 4.0 in India. This was 4 years back. I think it's been a long journey since then. And again, this we have to really demystify what is this Industry 4.0 and what do we mean for what does it mean for different people. And here I go back to that point where we say we look at it as a modular aspect and we look at it as something that every company at a micro level an industry at a macro level and the society or a nation at a meta level has to really have a strategy. What is it that I want to automate? How much do I want to network? And how far do I want to expose myself to the threat of data, espionage or whatever else you may think of, right? So in that system, I think one of the key things, and this is it's a subject very close to me. I think the SME in all our countries that we're talking about is really the innovation engine of growth, the engine of innovation. And Fraunhofer has had some amazing success with the SMEs because they are, particularly the M's, because they are hungry for innovation. They are nimble. They don't take 3 years to take a decision on a technology intervention, by which time the technology has moved on because of the bureaucratic procedures. They're very nimble. And so I find a lot of interest, a lot of hunger for technology in the SMEs. The main question is they are a little scared. I mean, they're scared, they're worried whether the investment that they will put into it, is it relevant? Is it an imperative? And what will be my ROI on it? So if we are able to give them use cases where they see whether in India or elsewhere, people have dealt with this subject in a way that has actually brought them dividends, then I think you don't need to take this, narrative any further. They would be on board with you. So one of the things they would need is an awareness campaign, and this is not just talking about it, but also actually bringing them in contact, which is why in Germany, Fraunhofer has several contact points where the small and medium industry comes to that center, you know, learns how other people have done. And believe me, this is all not secret because, much of this is already there. It's just a matter of how do I adapt this in the present environment, in the era of globalization, in my setting, right? So you have a bed of case studies which they are able to play around with. They understand how others have worked with it. Then they are able to even formulate a problem statement and say, let me work with this, and we find solutions for them. So I think these contact centers in India are really missing. What we have is a few centers where a lot of good work is happening, but I think we need to expand this and bring more and more SMEs in the fold so that we know what's going on. The other thing I want to, if I may be allowed, show you a slide of how we have dealt with some of the typical issues facing the SME. And here you will see that we have picked up something which is, let me try to show you, a very typical SME issue. And we have tried to solve this by some very simple processes. You look at this, this is an adaptive manufacturing process. This is from our institute in Aachen, which is the hotbed of manufacturing in Germany. And they have a very big community for tool making. This is something so critical for any system in manufacturing, but it has in India, it's one of the weakest in tool making. Whether the life of a tool, whether the usage, whether the processes. If we are to think that energy and technology are the main things that we look at this, then such a system gives you a very quick understanding of how do I save energy. Do I use all the processes, milling, grinding, EDM, etc., or do I find the shortcut which will ensure the efficiency but also save resources? And then, if you can see on the left side or my right hand side, you can see the way in which you can reach the customer fastest. So there are model-based forecastings, there is understanding of the data, there is understanding of the process, and saving resources and time, which is very, very critical, and it's a currency of itself. The second example I'd like to give you is a digital twin. By now, this word is fairly well known in the industry, but in tool and die making, this assumes much greater significance because with the usage of 2 or 3 ways of dealing with it, whether it's process data simulation or CAD/CAM, you can address some very critical functions like understanding of tolerances, of dimensions, of prediction of the process and of the life of a tool, and also saving time. So if you have to look at a system where you are having to do 60,000 hours on a tool, you can compress that and you can actually give with just a digital twin, not the real so the tool, you can give your customer a very good understanding and a confidence level of is this tool something that can meet the requirements of the customer. This is one of a couple of examples that I'd like to share. And I'd also like to say that one of the key things that we have done in Germany is a couple of internet platforms where people have easy access. One is the Fort Knox platform, which is for manufacturing, so that such use cases are put on a platform. And the other one is the International Data Security platform, where companies can pose their challenges and understand how others have solved these issues. So these are some of the ideas that I'd like to leave behind as food of thought.
Thank you, Anadi. I think support for SMEs is important, and I think that ecosystem needs far more investment and perhaps collaboration between government and industry to be able to ensure that the small companies, which are really vendors and suppliers to larger ones, are kept safe. Christian, how would you look at this? Of course, the definition of small and medium in Germany is very different from in India. But is there any thought that you would like to share on how the smaller companies can be brought on the platform?
So what we have learned over the years is, and what is still valid, is especially the small and medium-sized companies need a lot of guidance. So if you're going to a fair, if you go to markets, and I think so tons of products and solutions are presented. And even if I look at our Siemens portfolio, you will find tons of products which indeed are great to improve. But what these companies are looking for, really to understand how they can gain value out of that. And I think the time where investments are flowing also out of these companies into some, let's do a proof of concept, let's test something. I think these are over. That's what we experienced in the German market or European market. So they are really count on saying, okay, at the end, something needs to bring out and there must be value. And that's why we also work a lot with demo centers, presenting customers, bring them on site, learn the technology, but starting also really create ideation process to really understand where we can identify and can slice the elephant on that. And what's interesting is that in this discussion you find these certain areas. So we started with customers looking on production and end up that the main benefit in improving is in the service maintenance afterwards. And then we jumped into the service maintenance and said, okay, what is the issue really about that? It's guiding about service engineers, it's optimizing the material availability, it's interacting with predictive maintenance, when will the machine stop? And then we start building and selecting the right technologies. And I think this some kind of guidance is very important for small-sized and medium companies we have to do. And what I always recommend to those companies is partner. So focus on your domain knowledge and do not start and build IT or software development competence, because they then start and say, okay, I have to develop my application on my own, I have to do that. Then they try to hire people, they are not finding the right skills. I think there's so much partners available on the market, and especially if I look at India. I mean, I talk about a lot of solutions in Germany, but most of them are engineered in India. So all the great products coming from us, all the solutions are done by great teams in India. So there is no need, I think, for those companies to say, I do it on my own and go through all the lessons learned. There are platforms available, there are teams available. So that's why I always say partner, 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 and build on your domain know-how.
That's a good point. I think that partnership is critical, Kishan. Shivram, if I can come to you on this point, you understand the ground realities in India, and I think the sectoral differences within the SMEs are also very vast. What is then the best way?
You see, presently I'm very active with an organization called C4I4, right? Center for Industry 4. It is a government-supported organization, and our mandate is to promote the understanding and use of Industry 4 in the small and medium sector, more in the small and perhaps even in the micro sector. So we have met and had many conversations with so many of these people, and yes, there are various apprehensions in this sector about these new technologies. In general, I will say it is not just fair to point out upon them and say they have some fears. Everyone has a certain apprehension and curiosity about something new, and the new is always seen as a enemy of the old or of the existing. And if I am carrying on quite well right now, why should I change? Which is a matter of bringing in an unpredictable risk into my organization. So this is something, they have to give up the comfort of doing the business as they are doing today for a future benefit. And this future benefit has to come out very clear to them. So here so many questions come out. What is your reference to it? Who else has used it? Are there examples? Right? And what is the ROI? And so on. All of this is actually to bring the comfort to move into the uncharted, unknown area. Now, typically, what has been propagated, initially we have to create an awareness, then we have to run some pilots, and then there will be a full-scale implementation. This is the traditional standard way of going forward. Awareness campaigns, we have done many. I mean, I think I have spoken myself in at least 2 such sessions every month for the last more than 1 year. So several hundreds of people have listened to this. We have done pilots. Now, the difference between doing a pilot, which is a sample implementation in one small corner of the factory, to a total transformation. There's a huge gap over there. Because, for one, the pilot is actually decided by a very narrow gremium, by a narrow panel within the company. Whereas a full-fledged transformation of the entire way of doing business needs a buy-in from each and every individual, every stakeholder, not just the worker, but also the stakeholder, that is the vendors, the customers, everybody. Correct? Now, this is the actual issue that many managers or owners of small businesses are not very clear. How will I go and convince the other stakeholders? How will I convince my workers? The problem of translating the argumentation for Industry 4 to each and one of these stakeholders, this is what actually today holding them back quite a lot. Because actually they have to listen to you and then convert somebody else. Right? And now another factor definitely is that every new technology, every new implementation costs money. There's no secret about it. Of course, it's going to cost money. And if it costs more money, then the risk is correspondingly has a higher weightage. There's more risk. One of the ways where we could perhaps encourage the implementation is that we look at some kind of, pay as you or leasing or actually buying and so on, so that the amount of perceived risk reduces. We are, of course, quite convinced that there is no risk it will work, but it is a different worldview from the owner of a small business, maybe who is doing 100 crores a year or something like that. Right? The third problem is that many of these technologies, Industry 4 especially, are promoted by the larger companies and who try to promote as much as the work and the procedures, also a product basket. And there is a sales resistance. There is resistance to sales of people who say that they are talking all of this data and everything else, but only to sell their 3D printer. Right? So there is this element of non-conviction, which also comes in out there. So there is a good amount of complexity all around, but much of it is actually fear of the unknown, of the unseen. And we still have a lot of work to do with the as the size of the company becomes smaller and smaller. For the larger companies, and especially for those companies who have a strong link to Europe or something like that, it's not so difficult because if their parent company has already installed and it works, then it is not too big a risk for the subsidiary to actually do it. So we are seeing for the initial implementation only with such companies and the larger, of course, Indian companies who are who have a strong brand presence in the Western markets. These are the two places where the implementation is going quickly. In the other places, it is still quite an hill. I think that much from my side for this question.
Pranjal, if you could hear that, I, I think, Pranjal, can you hear us?
I
What we
think
can do, yeah, I think it's a little frozen there. Some challenges with the network. I think we have come to a close of today's discussion because it's already 2:55, and I can see a lot of questions being posted in the questions chat. So I think if it's okay with all of you, we can begin with the question and answers. In the meanwhile, I'll also request if somebody wants to come to the screen and share their questions, ask their questions directly to the speakers. You can raise a hand. We can take a couple of them probably. But I think we can start with the questions around. Sivakumar has asked what are the challenges in meeting ROI? How can we overcome this? I think it's a common question that people have with ROI and Industry 4.0 that how can we overcome this? Also, Mr. Ajay Dagat has asked us what are the cost to advantage ratio in agri-produce. So, who would like to go for the first one? How can we overcome the ROI crisis or challenges around it?
I think each one of us can answer it. So maybe
yeah.
Yeah, I think we can take in a short, a minute answer from each one of you.
Yeah, well, it is also an issue of how you see ROI, right? I mean, many of the companies that are open to new technology interventions and a larger perspective look at ROI over a period of time, which is not quarter to quarter. And I would also say that, in certain specific technology interventions, like if you're putting a sensor in place and you're collecting data and you're using it for something, then your ROI is very clearly stated. But here we are talking about a transformational journey. And so we have to balance both. One is that you have to look at an ROI that will tide you through your business. But the second is at least a 3 to 5 year horizon where you're looking at developing a competitive advantage and even actually, I would say a survival status, so that you are not left behind in the race. So one has to be very careful. It is a complete mix of trying to understand what is the time frame I'm looking at, what is the expense of technology, because there are a variety of technology options available today. What is the mix that I'm going to put into place, and what is the kind of ROI that I'm looking at? So if each company would have to look at it in a very clear way. Most of the technologies today, whether the sensors from Siemens, etc., in India, they have been showcased, particularly for energy consumption. They have a very clear ROI, which is also informed to the client. And so there are products in place which you can pick up off the shelf. But again, I would really plead for this very, very smart Indian companies who are so good in IT to actually put a little bit more thought and look at a 1.5 to 3 year horizon at least for the ROI and for developing competitive advantage. Otherwise, we'll be only trying to take products that are off the shelf, and once their utility is over, we'll be a follower forever. Now, that's the question we need to answer also. Thank you.
True.
I think
But I want to take this to Christian because it's not just about what you're investing, but I think it's also putting away the older technology you've invested in. So, Christian, when you are working with your clients, ROI is not just about what you put in, but you also have to take out what was not relevant earlier. How do you balance the two?
Yeah. So when we talk with customers, it's like Anna also said, it's that mostly when we talk about ROIs, our customers do not have the data available. So if we talk about maybe process efficiency and so on, we said, okay, where in which stage are you today? And they can't answer. Yeah, they said, yeah, maybe that, maybe that. And this is where mostly also it makes sense to find a baseline to say, okay, and this also where digitization can help to bring some kind of start with some kind of transparency. This does not have to mean that you are fully digital, but you can also collect it manually and then say, okay, based on that data, I can make some assumption and move forward. What we see with our product portfolio, I think we have tons of references, customer experience, what we can say, look at this customer in this particular situation, we have experienced that ROI in that area, and then working on that data and reflect to customer base. Yeah, when it comes to very individual discussion, then it also makes sense. We have a consulting group who's very specified in ROI, who works with methodologies in elaborating, working with the stakeholder, analyze, elaborating, okay, what are the impacts, and then trying to calculate the ROI in the end. And then afterwards, it will be also a continuous measure. I have one example which interesting when we talk about this digital twin stuff. Yeah, and there was one easy customer where we introduced a digital twin for the production plant, for the plant engineering, and this was easy. The customer coming out of a semiconductor environment and crashing those mirrors you're creating to validate your how you say your plant in the semiconductor industry costs 2 to 3 million. And then you can think of, if you do your automation concept and so on, and you test everything, how much of these mirrors you might crash into in this commission phase. And then we calculate with the customer, and the customer said, switching to a virtual commissioning, especially with this high price goods that I'm handling, it makes absolutely sense. Yeah, and there was also a break even after 10 or 11 mirror, which was happening in the past quite often, that you crash 10 of these mirrors, which means then 2 million, 3 million, 20 million saved. So that was an easy ROI for that digital twin. Yeah, that's my feedback.
Super. Mr. Sivaram, your views on this?
Shivram, I want to come to you on a specific question, which is about private telecom networks or manufacturing plant automation. Should spectrum be given to them? How will that work?
Your voice was breaking a little, but from what I heard, how do we manage the networks?
I think the question is something which is posted by Mr. Vikram Tiwatia, Deputy Director General COAI. He has asked, what is the view of the panelists on private telecom networks for manufacturing plant automation? Should spectrum be given to them? Who will run that network?
Okay, so this okay, I will take the technology part of it and not the policy part of it, because I am not part of the policy gremium. Okay, so essentially, yes, we would want a lot of bandwidth, but actually speaking, for digitalization of a manufacturing facility, we do not need too much of public bandwidth. We can manage with a lot of work from within the organization, from within the factory itself. We don't need to go out of the factory all the time. if there are multi-plant, multi-location kind of companies and they want to exchange data, then it is possible. Now, I think slightly the question comes towards the famous question between cloud and the edge. That how much you want to do on the edge and how much you want to take to the cloud, right? So, I mean, maybe this is the kind of thing, because if you do much more computation on the edge near the machine itself or within the factory, then you only send a few data out into the cloud. Whereas if most of your resources are out there in the cloud, then you have to send a huge stream of big data out into the cloud, get it processed, and bring it back. Now, this is a kind of a, let me say, trade-off which each organization has to define for themselves. It is fairly independent of who runs it. The cloud platforms themselves are today mostly in the private space. The network connectivity is largely transparent and unbiased towards any one of these. I don't know if I have answered the thing face on, but this is the view for, because that was a question which did not come up between the edge and the cloud. So I took a chance to bring it in. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I think the next question is from Mr. Venkat Subramaniam. He's asked, what are the further significant future trends and challenges
Thank you.
against the
So, you know,
backdrop of
question, if
COVID-19?
some of you allow me, should I?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a delay, Pranjal, between what we're saying and when you speak. Can you hear me now? I was just moving on to the next question.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so I think let's continue to this figure this out. So what are the further significant future trends and challenges against the backdrop of COVID? For example, focus areas, new services, products, customer specific requirements, etc. So what are the kind of what are your perspectives on the future trends against the backdrop of COVID is what Mr. Subramanian wants to ask. Uh, would you want to answer this, Anandi? It's you're on mute. You're on mute.
So I think we are still discovering. We are not yet post-COVID. We are still in COVID. We are. It's all. We have regularly our international talks in Fraunhofer with our clients to understand what are the major issues we are dealing with. But one thing is very clear: first and foremost, the security and safety of the employees of your infrastructure. That is absolutely center point. So all what we discussed in our network is how do you ensure that post-COVID when you come in, or even towards the end of COVID when you start coming in, how do you ensure everybody's safe? And every organization would like to look at some products that ensure the safety of their workforce. And of course, the infrastructure, because this is something that is tactile, it gets transferred. So it's a very different kind of animal. The second is, I think, one of the aspects that is most hindered is the mobility of goods. So one is trying to see how do you ensure that there are technology or capability to address this issue that the customer still receives his goods. And as you have seen, there are now many digital ways of ordering for stuff, but how do they still reach you? And you're talking about, say, even your regular usage, like your groceries or whatever. But when you go to an industry setting and you're talking about just-in-time technology, then suddenly the challenge is much, much, much larger. So we are at this point in time in Fraunhofer and with our partners worldwide discussing about mobility of products and reaching to the customer in a safe and secure environment. I think that is one of the challenges that we are addressing right now.
Yeah.
I could add a kind of a corollary to that.
Yes, please.
One of the big challenges which we are facing today, and I think this is going to happen in future as well, is the problem of having people without too much experience coming into the factory as workers. They may be having experience perhaps in some other department, but not in this particular department or in this particular area. So essentially unfamiliar people. And one of the big challenges which I'm seeing happening is intra logistics, not logistics as Anandi said from supply chain, but within the factory to bring from the store material to the workplace, right? So there are the regular people are not allowed to come into the factory for various reasons, or they are not available in the city itself. They have traveled, they have gone somewhere, etc. So then, how do you manage? How can technology manage? This is one of the examples where we can do very small local innovations, which as Indians we call it jugaad, with which we can overcome these problems. What we did was that we created a lot of Bluetooth beacons around this thing, and the person who actually has to get hold of a tray of material and bring it is guided by these Bluetooth beacons to go and pick up the particular material, and there we have some RFID tags. So when he picks the material, the SAP transaction automatically happens, and then he brings the material to the place of work, and then the work goes on. And with this, we do not have to be worried whether that one guy who was regularly doing it is today not able to come into the factory. So there are many areas, very small areas, but which mean a lot to the day-to-day efficiency of the factory, and where we can work if we have a micro view of the issue. The big problem with Industry 4 products today is most of them are from the macro view, from top down. And from top down, it gets stuck somewhere out there. Many a time you have to work from the bottom upwards, right?
Yeah. There is the next question comes from Purnendu Sinha from Tata. He wanted to ask that there are several startups offering solutions in Industry 4.0. However, there has not been much traction with large businesses in integrating them in their activities. So, what insights the panel members could give for a win-win situation for startups and large corporate? I think we can have Christian give his views about how it functions there in Germany between startups and large corporates. Co-creating these kind of stuff together, and then probably we can come to Anandi.
So, I mean, what we have set up in Siemens Next 45 is also 47 is also an initiative where we build up or include own startups in the environment. So I think what's good is using the innovation and the different view on the startups. I would never recommend, and this is always a challenge. Then, if you have a big company or whatever, is to integrate startups. Mostly, this is not very benefitable and has not worked. I know there's a lot of experts who've made up their mind how to integrate startups in a big company, but I think most of them were not successful because people are working in startups because they are successful there and they have a different mindset. So we are working closely with startups in those cases where we see a great potential in their solution and to scale their solutions, because that's always what we say. It's a challenge in the startups to find the right customer base, to scale this customer base, and also then to establish this really on a certain ground and bringing this to an industry standard or an industry stability. Yeah. So that's why I say it's I like to have them in the game on the innovation topic. Yeah, I saw also a lot of questions regarding this, how you bring minded people together. I think this can kick off your organization. That's also what we are using, especially at Siemens Advanta. Having a different culture and bringing those people in also is changing our culture, gives us a different spirit, especially in Siemens. And that's why we really appreciate this, but we are looking very carefully also how this fits and improve the entire story of their solutions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe one comment I have to say, what also our industry partners are looking for at a certain level you have to take risks on projects, and this is mainly where startups are not able to take big risk for big projects. Also, like we're only not talking about digitalization in manufacturing, or we also talk cities or bigger campus projects where those startups will not take the risk, but where such big companies like Siemens, we can take this risk, can jump in, but also then leverage the input from startups. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think the topic that springs up into my eye is the whole topic of ecosystem, right? And in India, this is something really very disjointed. I know that there are tremendous centers of excellence. I know some amazing companies, small, medium, startups, but unfortunately, there is no glue that brings them together. And what we really need in our country is some kind of a structured ecosystem, institutional linkage that addresses the strengths that each of these categories of stakeholders have and bring them together to accelerate innovation. For example, in Germany, and even now, right now as we speak, Fraunhofer is implementing 11 innovation centers in Brazil, where we are helping them to create innovation clusters around specific topics, bring various stakeholders so that they are attached to each other. If you're not even aware which startup is doing what, which is what the status of the country is today, how are you going to leverage that skill? How are you going to leverage a scale of a large company and a capability of a startup and a research institution that has the understanding to take it to a technology readiness of 5 or 6 or 7? If you do not have an understanding of what is available, how can you bring this system to place? So I would really plead to all those policymakers, to the industry who's listening in, and to the researchers, that we need to have a mindset of working together and not in silos. As long as we are working in silos, you will have incremental innovation advantage. You will not be able to make to that breakthrough advantage that you're looking at. So for topics like this, which are of a country, strategy level, we have to come together, pool our resources, and probably set up something like an innovation cluster for I40. Why don't we do that? We have people like Mr. Shivaram and like other institutions that are there. Why don't we bring them together and do something where we take up a few case studies and try and do it on a pilot basis, so that it can be brought out into the society and on a scalable basis, and let the large companies pick up. I mean, this is not something rocket science, but unfortunately, in our country, we stop at those individual successes. We don't take it to the larger scale and to an institutional advantage like other countries have done, whether it's England or US or Germany. And I think that's one of the key things that will define whether we make this revolution or not.
True. I think uh, excellent insights from both of you. Uh, there is one more question, and I think it's pretty important. We all talk about what kind of technologies or what are the kind of things that we should include while we talk about adopting Industry 4.0. Mr. Ajay Bhagat asks us what we should avoid while discussing Industry 4.0. Like in SAP, all of us faced many issues before it stabilized. So, what are the things that we can think of which we should avoid while discussing this? So, Mr. Sivaram.
Yes, I think it flows nicely from the previous question, as Anandi was pointing out. On one side, we are looking to the government or the policymakers to create a broad platform, but our experience has been in each and every sector, each and every new technology, whether it is mobile, 4G, whatever. While we wait for the government to do certain things and form platforms and so on, industry also likes to move on and create some local solutions. Today, one of the biggest problems when we want to go and talk about data collection or IoT or any such thing is how to deal with legacy machines, with legacy controller platforms, with platforms of a different manufacturer make, and how do you want to go about it. Okay. Now, this is one biggest timing block, and I have one, let me say, prescription for this, for which we don't need actually the government, but ourselves, that how to improve the interoperability between electronics of different makes by opening up the protocols which they use. This is well within the commercial powers of each one of those big giant companies. And if they would just take this small step to open up even their legacy ancient protocols, so that many of these small startups and local boys can make solutions to connect up with them, it can change the scenario in a way which actually today is very difficult to envisage even, because everybody will have a confidence. Today we go and say, I have a new machine, I can connect, but if it's it's an old one, it is from revision so and so or version so and so, spare parts are not available today. But in India, nobody throws away a machine or a controller just because it's old. You recondition it and you somehow make it work, and we have to preserve the value. We need that value in the factory.
Right. Right.
Correct?
So I think we can take a couple of more questions before we do the closing. One thing which has come up is from Mr. Ashish. Yes, Anandi, you're saying something. You're on mute. You'll have to unmute, Anandi.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to your question on what we should not talk about. I just had one point there to say. The topic should not be how we are going to lose jobs, because this really is scaremongering and it creates a lot of worry in the mind of particularly the SMEs. The fact is that this is a situation that's going to stay. The digitalization is a movement that's going to stay. We have to look at how are we going to reskill people. And recently, about a year back, there was a study in Germany by Fraunhofer and a couple of other institutions like Acatech, which said that the number of jobs that you will lose by not reskilling your people is going to be much, much larger than what you are going to lose by keeping the people with the same set of skills. So the one thing that we have to learn not to talk about is losing jobs. In fact, we have to start thinking, how can we reskill people? How can we rise to this challenge? And how can we create an opportunity out of this? And that is something I would really like to leave behind here in this group.
Yes, I couldn't agree more to this. Christian, coming to you.
Yeah, just one comment on this, because this is really an interesting discussion. And what I notice, especially here in Germany, and what I'm really missing when we talk about this technology stuff. So what I said already is, I think living in these ecosystems, I think is most important. So don't start to invent the wheel. Everyone has already, or there's someone who has done this. Get help and go forward like this. But I think there's one domain. If you look at all this artificial intelligence, data scientist, machine learning, and this is where we are working also very close on Chinese market, and they are doing a huge investment on these topics, starting from schools, starting from building teams, and also they've found work for really not skilled people, who have worked on farms, but now they are sitting in front of PCs and training algorithms. So also interesting. And I think this is something, if I look on Germany, I don't know how it is in India, we are in the education system are investing too less. So building people who are able to make sense out of data, building on machine learning and all that thing, I think there is a great potential in for the past, and we also see it with COVID solutions, recognizing people and so on, and all these things. And this is something I would really, this is what I push always here in Germany. I don't know how you do it in India, but please push in this direction, because this is really where potential is in, and we need the skilled people there.
Yeah, that's true. I think we can take one question, which is there are a lot of them actually, so we can probably take one more. One is about from Ashish Joshi from the Yamuna Power Limited. He asks us, how can Industry 4.0 be useful for energy utilities in smart grid implementation? I think, Christian, you guys have done a lot in terms of smart grid implementation using IoT, especially for Siemens. If you could quickly, answer that probably in a minute or two, then we can take one last question.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not really an energy expert on that, but just to understand the question, there's the Industry 4.0 and smart grid topic, and Actually, there was one project we did in India which was very interesting. I think the smart grid and monitoring the grid stability and so on. I think it's something where same as we see in manufacturing, there are solutions available. Interesting is now if you bring together these ecosystems, and we did a proof of concept with one customer in India where we see the have monitored the inner energy consumption of this manufacturing site. So when they put on the big machines, then the grid is, I would say, heavy loaded. How can we stabilize this? And we built a system of the smart grid operator or the grid operator and this manufacturing site, so that they can exchange data together in the system and see, okay, if when is the best time to switch on, and also the grid provider then can say, okay, I prepare something on my side that we know when production is switched on. And I know that still this grid topic and grid stability is something which is valid in India, which has quite improved. But there, as I said, it's where Industry 4.7 and grid operation can come together in this joint use case. Yeah.
Mhm. Right. Anandi, you can also probably share some thoughts on this because I'm sure Fraunhofer has worked a lot on smart grid implementation. Every word you speak, Anandi, is pearl that you're giving out. So if you can unmute and speak, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, I always mute it and I forget to unmute myself. No, well, yeah, Fraunhofer is very strong on energy systems, whether it's storage right up to grid and solar, wind. We have been looking at how do you create efficiencies in energy, and one of the solutions that we have come up, which we also implemented in some projects in India, is the digital energy systems, where you collect data not only from energy in companies but including water. So we are looking at a more sustainable manufacturing. So we have looked at the energy, water and consumption nexus and tried to say how can we create synergies. And there again, Industry 4.0 or the digitalization of these processes plays a very important role. One of the work that we are also doing with is, I saw one of the people from BSES here. So these are the kind of companies that we are talking to, and we're trying to see how can you create digital systems around energy. That data collection in India is still not very, very sound. So you need to have robust data collection, which is reliable, which can be utilized, for further work. So that is one thing that we are focusing on: efficient data collection, reliable data collection, and then to use that data in a very robust process where it is efficient and can be replicated, for further, and is real time. So these are the three things that we focus on.
Great, great. I think we have come to the end of the session. I think we couldn't get hold of Pranjal. He's still, finding it difficult to log back in because of the network situation that we have here. While we talk about everything else,
He's missing in action.
yeah, while we talk about everything else now, I think we are still battling out this data and network game in India. But the way I look at it is, I think it was a very insightful session wherein I think we covered on a lot of areas and a lot of topics as quick as we could in this good 90 minutes. I would like to say, my deepest thanks to all of you, Christian, Anandi, Mr. Sivaram, and to Pranjal, for being part of this session and being able to share so much with our audience. I think there are still a few questions which are there, and I would like to share those questions with you guys. And if you could, send back some answers that we could share them with the audience so that they go back with some key takeaways on this. Uh, I would also like to thank the IET and our entire staff team, as well as our working group members from the manufacturing working group, which is part of the IET Future Tech panel, who helped us curate this session and invite all of you for something like this. I don't think we could have done any better, with any other people for gathering for a session like this. One thing I would like to say to everyone is, this session wouldn't be complete without our respected attendees. The kind of questions they have asked, the way they have interacted has really made this session very engaging. We keep on doing these sessions on every Friday under the IT Digital Conversations to pick topics in areas which are not only solving current challenges but giving out future perspectives. The next one on next Friday is on telehealth, breaking barriers and embracing technology. I have just posted the link in the chat window here. So for people who would want to join us for next week, they can do that by clicking on this link. In the meanwhile, if everyone could just sum it up in one sentence, before we leave the audience here, just wrapping this up. So starting with you, Anandi, the future with Industry 4.0 in India.
Unmute.
Yes, unmute again.
There's something I need to learn. I think your title says it all. Either we adapt, adopt, and make it a part of our life and move on with it, or we have the risk of being not only overtaken, but I would even go so far to say it's really a survival question. Are we going to be left out in this race? And the fact that today the world is so connected, can we afford to be not part of that large supply chain? Is the question that we have to ask ourselves. And particularly if you're for India, I would say this is having lost on the manufacturing curve. We have a huge opportunity because the IT capability that in this country we have is something if we do not leverage now, I think we have no one to blame but ourselves.
True. Coming to you, Christian.
Yeah, I think there's no question. We have to go the journey. We have learned from the crisis how to be flexible, to be adaptable is required. I think all the stories around digitization, IoT, Industry 4.0, however we call it, are necessary for that. I would agree. You have the local teams there. I'm really cooperating a lot with my teams in India. They're great experts. If I heard you're not leveraging them a lot, please do it. I can recommend. There's a great team there, and go ahead and don't be afraid also to try something out. Yeah, we can also fail.
True. And I think that's how we succeed. If we don't fail, we don't succeed somehow. Mr. Sivaram, your comments on this, please.
I think most of what needs to be said has been already told. One point which I would like to make at the end, which has not been made till now, is that for all of these technologies, all of these initiatives, we need a lot of young people to be able to take
Mhm.
it forward. And all of these young people, young engineers who are going to come into the market in the next few years, have to come out with a good grounding in data technologies, Industry 4, automation, all of these topics. And today we have a little lack in terms of faculty who are able to deliver this kind of material, because when the faculty was studying in college, these technologies were not around, right? So we are also conducting at C4I4, but many other people also, for a course for training the trainers to help them to educate. And I think this education is something which we cannot forget in all ROI and everything else. So every company, big or small, must contribute towards educating the next generation, the people who are in your workforce, but also who you hope will join your workforce.
Right.
That is it from me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, speakers, panelists, and thank you so much for giving us this time and opportunity, to be part of this session. I want to thank all the attendees here, who have gathered here out of their busy schedule, giving us this 90 minutes from this Friday. We would continue to do this and engage with all of you over the period of time, and look at certain areas and topics which would help us, create a better tomorrow and co-create a better future. And with all of that, I would like to sign off with this session now. And once again, thank you all. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank
Have a
you.
great weekend.
Thank you very much.